Hello there, voltage modular people. PoohBear here, and welcome to my channel. And today we're going to be having a quick look at on change trigger. It's a straightforward device. It can get a little bit confusing with some of the options when you set them, but basically it's looking for a CV change. When it detects a CV change, it's either going to re-trigger a gate or it's going to send a trigger out, and it'll obviously come out of this wire here. We've also got an option here called out, which is a straightforward button, so we can actually turn our output off, so we don't have to save us dewiring anything if we wish to. So as I said, it's going to re-trigger a gate, which might be a bit of a funny terminology. At the moment, I've got my big meter wired up and my counter wired up, but you're not going to see anything coming out of this device until you've actually got something going into it. It only needs a wire. So I'm just going to quickly put my wire in. And as soon as I've connected this wire up, you may have seen, hey, we detected this has counted a change in the CV signal coming out. In fact, shall we show all wires? There we go, might make it a little bit easier. So it's detected a CV change, and sure enough, the CV change was a 5 volt signal is coming out of this wire. And it stays constant 5 volt signal. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to pass it in a change. It doesn't matter really what the voltage is. I'm just changing this signal, because at the moment it's sitting at 0. And as soon as I do change that signal, it's going to take that 5 volt and it's going to drop it down, and straight away it's just going to obviously allow it to go back up again. So it just re-triggers the gate. So we can see the counts have gone up, and over here, well, that was our original 5 volts. It dropped it to a 0, and now it's sitting back on a 5 volt again. When I let go of my go, it's going to re-trigger again, because obviously whatever this value is, it happens to be 5 volts, when it drops, it's going to drop to a 0, which is obviously a difference. It's looking for a difference. So because it's looking for a difference, it's going to re-trigger the gate, and you can see it's actually scrolled down one more, and the counters have gone up over here as well. Now, with the ignore 0, we can obviously counter-react that. So if I say ignore 0 on, I'm just going to quickly reset these over here. So these counters are now sitting on 5 and 0. So again, I'm going to click go once. We get our, so it'd be 2, a count of 2, because it's had to drop it and push it back up. Here's our 5 volts, gone to 0, back to 5 volts. But this time when I let go of it, nothing happens. It stays on 5 volts. There's nothing else changed on it. So we've told it to ignore 0. This happens to have dropped down to a 0 volt. So that's what that ignore 0 is about. At the moment, we're also on allow data loss. Well, for this kind of triggering, it's actually no good. Over here, I've got myself something called a spanner. That's my, it's an LFO. In fact, it's a very, very, very slow running LFO, because it's running at 0.0001. As you can see, the speed of it is absolutely lightning fast. So it's a very, very slow LFO, but it is still pushing out, 48,000 changes down the wire, which is coming through this device, and obviously being counted over here, and it's actually going ballistic over here. When I run things really quickly, my big meter, because it's not really worth doing it, I just put the unique mode on, and then what it's going to do is it's going to just keep them two flipping around the top. Also, because we're going so fast, I'm actually going to tell this to ignore zeros, so we get our true count. So this is producing, at the moment, 24,000 re-triggered gates. So it's dropping that gate signal down, which is effectively a trigger. Or if I flip it onto trigger, we're now producing 24,000 triggers. You could say they are literally the opposite. So if you can imagine that I had sample 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, on sample 1 in trigger mode, I'm high on a 0, low on a 1, high on a 2. And with a gate, it would be the opposite way around. I'd be low on the 0, high on the 1, and low on the 2. So it's literally doing the opposite. So that's what that's doing. But what is actually happening as well is we've got this option called allow data loss. If I was to turn this option on, because that might be the easiest way to explain it, and reset these counters, we're on trigger at the moment. Well, trigger's a constant 5 volts, and as you can see, we've got nothing else is changing. But we know we've got over 48,000 changes coming out of here, so why is it not counting up? Because what's happened is the change is come in, and it's gone, oh, I'm in trigger mode, I'm going to go high. Hey, I'm high. On the next sample, it's saying, oh, my value has changed. I'm going to go high. Well, I'm already high, so I'm staying high. And basically, it's going to stay high. And as you can see, we've effectively turned this trigger into an incredibly long gate. And it's going to stay long forever until either we unplug this cable. So I could unplug this cable, push, and it's going to drop that signal back down to 0, so the trigger can actually finish. or I can put it back on again. And the same would be true for the gate mode. So if I turn it onto gate mode, it's now doing the reverse. The gate is now constantly 0 because we want to allow data loss. Again, if I was to unplug it, it'll allow it to go up to its full 5 volts. So what the allow loss basically is doing, it's saying, well, if we talk about trigger mode, it might be a slightly easier way of talking about it. So allow data loss is saying, right, I'm going to fire a trigger off. On the next sample, it actually says, oh, I've just fired a trigger off. I've got to drop down. I have to drop down. Then on the next sample, it say, have I changed? Yes. Oh, I can fire a trigger off. And it works on that principle. So on the next sample, it looks, did I fire off? Yes. Then I've got to drop. I'm allowed to lose the data. So I don't have to worry about what that sample came in as. And it's allowed to lose it. Now, if I happen to have this sample comes in at this value, so it goes, yeah, I'm going to fire high, and then I've got another signal coming in, and say it's on 5. Well, it's going to come along and say, I've just fired the trigger off, I've got to drop low. And this time I'm not going to change this 5 volts. On the next read of it, it's going to say, I was 5 volts, I never sent a message out for that 5 volts, I sent the message out for that last one, so I will send the message out for that one this time. And it only sends it out once. So it doesn't matter, that now stays a constant 5. But it does recognise when it's one sample behind and it's a constant value, I didn't send it, so I will send it. But if it's a change signal, and a change signal, it's going to lose that bit of data. It just says, oh, well, I'm going to lose that bit of data and I'll send a trigger out there, 0 here, and I'll send a trigger out there. So that's what the allowed data loss does. So, you know, basically allows you to produce up to 24,000 triggers per second, or you can send up 24,000 re-gates. This one doesn't make too much more sense of running this at a high speed, but it does on the trigger. So the only option I haven't really spoken about is this off. If I quickly just move this back onto the gate, and I'm going to take a copy, so I'm just going to stretch across the screen. There we go, let's take a copy of that, and I'm going to wire this gate up into the off. In fact, I'm going to do something a little bit different, thinking about it. So at the moment, obviously when I hit my go, we've done a quick drop and we've come back up again, and we're now pushing 5 volts. If I just quickly do this, and I'm going to say I'm going to ignore zeros at the moment. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to hold my go down. My go has come along and caused it to drop and come back up again. Then literally 10 samples later, I've sent another signal into the off to turn it off. So over here now, we're actually sitting at 0 volts. And in fact, I should be able to let go and it should stay at 0 volts, which it has done. So effectively, usually the gate is sitting high. What I've done is I've actually come in and said, no, turn the gate off. So it's now sitting into the off, but it's waiting. And if I unplug this, So this is just a trigger which goes in here. So you just send a trigger in here. It's now waiting for a change. So as soon as it receives a CV change, it will kick all back in again. So as soon as it receives this change, here it goes. We're now sitting back up by constant 5 volts. So it's just a way that we could come along and say to it, actually, let's just inject that and we can turn that into, and turn that off. So that really does sort of cover everything. So thank you for watching and bye for now.